This is Franchise Today, brought to you by FRM Solutions, providers of the best-in-class software solutions for franchise relationship management. Franchise Today is your destination for weekly information, conversations, and interviews with accomplished industry leaders, all of whom share best practices for sustainable growth and sensible franchising. Here now, your host, Stan Friedman, to kick off this week's podcast with the Solink front of the house.
This is Franchise Today, and it is Wednesday, May 22nd. I'm Stan Friedman, coming to you today from home base in the beautiful Buckhead neighborhood of Atlanta, Georgia. Speaking of beautiful, my thanks again to my good friend EJ Mayers for inviting the show to podcast last week from the podcast studios at the beautiful Atlanta Tech Park in Peachtree Corners, another great suburb of Atlanta. It's in a neighborhood in Gwinnett County, just northeast of the city. The Atlanta Tech Park is a global innovation center designed to connect young companies with other companies around the world. And of course, my thanks go to my incredible guests last week, Grant Simon and Greg Thomas, the empire building multi-unit successful partners of LSGF Management and franchisees, multi-unit franchisees, I might add, of Smoothie King, T-Mobile Retail, and Great Clips. Had the pleasure of having them with me in studio at the Tech Park to talk about their meteoric growth of up to more than 160 units owned and operated across those three brands. Two great guys and a wonderful interview and a great venue for all of it. So thank you, one and all. Remember, each and every week, we hear from those representing different points on the franchising compass. But all the guests that you hear here on Franchise Today have one thing in common. They've all demonstrated the ability to put the word sustainable in front of growth and sensible in front of franchising. And they all come here to share their nuggets with you from their life's experiences and from their core competencies. And in just a few minutes, I'll be joined today by Terry Kelm, another success story in the franchising world, who's going to talk about an often overlooked, or at least not as often talked about topic in franchising, one that needs more light of day. And that is to talk about franchise resales, which, it's not true, but it's perceived sometimes to be maybe a negative or something that's not as positive as franchise development is when it starts out new with a brand new unit. Well, we're going to dig into all of that today and talk about all of that at greater length. But I'm first going to kick off today's show with the front of the house, which does kick off today with something that reminds me of when Paul Segreto and I hosted this show together. Paul and I would typically once or twice a month stumble onto something that would cause us to scratch our heads, laugh out loud, and say to one another, you just can't make this stuff up. Well, in this case, Paul, I wish you were here for it, but I'm going to have to report it out anyway. And I'm talking about Dunkin' Brands and something new that they're rolling out. If you love Dunkin', there's now a fashionable way to show off your favorite drinks. Yes, the Boston coffee chain has launched 8 nail polish colors that are inspired by names of lattes and ice cream flavored drinks at Dunkin'. The limited edition collection includes the colors of Cocoa Mocha, Caramel Craze, Blueberry, Dunkin's Butter Pecan, Pistachio Almond Fudge, and of course, Banana Split. Well, Paul, I wish you were here to be laughing out loud with me and saying you just can't make it up. I can't imagine there's possibly a Dunkin' nail polish collection without orange and pink Dunkin' and pretty Dunkin'. But you know what? I don't think about wearing my coffee. I think about drinking it. So maybe it's just me. I don't know, but I'm just saying. Also this week in the front of the house, I want to tell you about something I've already posted on the Franchise Today Facebook page, and that's about Vernon Davis, tight end for the Washington Redskins. Most everyone in this audience knows of my passion for working with professional athletes and helping them transition to franchising. Well, I can't take credit for this one, but it still gives me great pleasure to report it out. These days, Davis and Atlanta Falcon Mohamed Sanu are partnered up to bring and operate 6 Jamba Juice locations to the northern D.C., Virginia metro. This is in addition to the 5 that Davis already operates in Northern California. His franchising career actually began 6 years ago during his playing days with the 49ers. Last year, Davis teamed up with Atlanta Falcons wide receiver Mohamed Sanu to bring more of the fresh fruit and vegetable goodness of Jamba to the Mid-Atlantic. Think of them perhaps as a couple of smooth smoothie operators. Davis, did I say that? Davis grew up in D.C. and played college ball at the University of Maryland before the 49ers drafted him in 2006. He racked up 9 seasons with them before being traded to the Broncos, where he claimed a Super Bowl ring, and in 2016, he returned home to play for the Redskins. When you read this piece, which you can find on the Franchise Today Facebook page, all linked up, when you read this piece, you'll see clearly that this is not just an athlete's money getting into the franchise business, but rather that these guys are all in and extremely involved in their business day to day. I'm going to try to secure Vernon and Muhammad both, I hope, for an episode upcoming of Franchise Today, so keep your ears glued for that. Another piece that jumped off the franchise news pages this past week deals with another great brand and corporate culture. I'm talking about CEO Don Fox and Firehouse Subs. In this piece, Fox offers insight into the company's strategy and what's ahead, highlighting the fact that the success of Firehouse Subs isn't dependent solely on customers liking the product. They also have to like Firehouse Subs, the company, which has been operating for 25 years. For those of you who don't know their roots, brothers and former firefighters Robin and Chris Sorensen founded the company in Jacksonville, Florida back in 1994. It's grown to over 1,100 restaurants currently in 46 states, Canada and Puerto Rico, and today employs about 15,000 people. Don Fox joined the company in 2003 when the chain was merely at 65 restaurants. He says the catalyst for Firehouse Subs' growth was verbalizing the company's mission statement, quote, to carry on its commitment to and passion for hearty and flavorful food, heartfelt service, and public safety. When it comes to culture, Firehouse is definitely a company that walks the talk, and Don Fox, too, is on my radar for a future episode of Franchise Today, so stay tuned for that. And that, my friends, is the SoulLink front of the house, brought to you by SoulLink, a company that provides amazing loss prevention technology for restaurants and retail. In fact, I describe SoulLink as a company that does for loss prevention the equivalent of what Apple and Android have done for cell phones. They've made these tools smarter. Whether you operate a single unit or are a multi-unit empire builder or the franchisor or an executive of a retail or restaurant brand with unit-level economics on your plate, you need to learn more about SoulLink. Once deployed, SoulLink's technology captures instances of exceptional behavior at all of your sites. SoulLink then records everything that goes on in the front and the back of the house, and utilizing its gold standard algorithms, creates reports that direct your attention to the very specific video clips that it's captured, so that you may view these events without rewinding and watching hours and hours of tape. And what's best is that SoulLink does all of its heavy lifting, utilizing your existing point of sale and security equipment. There is no new hardware needed to put SoulLink to work for you. As always, find out more about them at www.soullink.com. That's SOLINK.com. And now for today's guest. Terry Kelm is the president of the Franchise Referral and Resale Division of Sunbelt Business Brokers, where his focus is on assisting franchisors with their growth and transition goals. Whether you're looking for new franchisees or wanting to provide a resource to a franchisee looking to sell, or for refranchising corporate units, Sunbelt is the only national business brokerage group that's prepared to assist in all facets. And this man is passionate about both. Terry, welcome to Franchise Today.
Stan, it's an honor. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Well, it's my honor to have you on. So how's that? We are each the president of the other's Mutual Admiration Society.
Guilty.
Well, I'm happy to have you here, Terry. This is a conversation that I think is maligned. You know, it's kind of like people who hear about franchise companies in the maid business and they go, "Ooh, I don't want to be a maid." Well, those companies aren't looking for people to be maids. They're looking for people to operate a maid business. And I think when we talk resales, the initial connotation is, that's a negative. You know, somebody went out of business or something failed, or that's the first perception. But I think that when we peel the onion back a little further, hopefully today's discussion and conversation will cause a paradigm shift for some in the audience to better understand how that's something that you can take and change from maybe lemon into lemonade. Would that be a fair assessment?
Absolutely. I think you're 100% accurate in that statement, and I do think that the franchisors that have embraced the resales as an opportunity are benefiting from that now, and will continue to benefit as the amount of resales will increase over time.
Well, Terry, let's talk more about that as we roll it out and have a conversation today. But for those who listen regularly, everyone knows that these conversations pretty much start the same way each week, with the affirmation that few in franchising got here by design. There are some that are born into second generation of franchise families, but most of us don't go out with intention getting into franchising. Franchising kind of finds us. So let's roll back the tape, if you will, and take us to the time and the place where that happened for you.
Wow. Yeah, great. I will join the masses and say that franchising was not on my radar when I came to the position that I'm in. My career started while I was still in college. I was recruited to work for of all things, a VHS video distributor.
Wait a minute. A what?
A VHS tape video distributor, right? Which, yes, exactly right.
There may be some in our audience that don't know what that is.
Well, if they were born in 2000 or later, they probably don't. And it's kind of weird because it's not often where you have a front row seat to both the infancy start of an industry, watch that industry grow to become very much part of the fabric of mainstream America, and then also see the demise of that all within probably a 20 or 30 year period. But that's exactly what happened to VHS. But I was recruited out of college to work for a video distributor, and did that for 13, 14 years. Kind of saw the end of things starting to unravel early, and decided that I wanted to have a little more control. I wanted to become my own boss. And so I went to the local Sunbelt office in my market in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and talked to the owner, Scott Everett, who was actually someone who I met through the video days and worked with in the video industry, and then he started the Sunbelt office here. And I told him I was just looking for an opportunity. I was ready to have my own my own business, small business, and he showed me a couple businesses. Some of them were franchises, and that's where I kind of looked at the opportunity to become a franchisee. But then he also said to me, "Hey, I have something else a little bit unique and out of the box that I'm just starting." And he had been tabbed by Sunbelt to spearhead a national franchise resales program for Sunbelt Business Brokers on a national basis. And he said, "I'm looking for a guy to help me do this. It would be a partnership. I think you got a lot of the traits that would be good at this." And so, I went home that night after sitting down with him and started researching franchise and franchise industry and franchise resales, which if you Googled that 16 years ago, you'd see there wasn't a lot of information on it. So it was very much an exciting, but a little bit scary because I didn't know what I was getting into. But when I went there that day, franchise resales was not my vocabulary, and yet here I am 16 years later, and I'm the president of our little division. So it's been an exciting ride, but certainly I was one of the unintentional owners in the franchise industry.
That's quite a story. So you not only got into franchising, but you got into business brokerage and franchising at the same time, and both of those were foreign to you. Is that right?
If you're going to leap, Stan, you might as well leap with both feet, right?
Well, how did you go?
It was all new to me. It was all new to me, and I had a lot of learning to do. And I'll be the first to admit I haven't learned it all. I learn something new every day in this industry, and but it's been a lot of fun, and I've really enjoyed the franchise aspect of it. Just the relationships, and obviously meeting you and people like Jerry Darnell and things like that over the years have just been have really been the icing on the cake of why I love franchising.
Were you IFA members then, or how did you go about getting yourself educated? I mean, your partner could clearly educate you on Sunbelt and on the Sunbelt Business Brokerage side. I'm sure that you got some training from people that came before you. But
yep, and yeah, so exactly. So I he was good at being able to teach me the Sunbelt aspect of the things, and Sunbelt, of course, being a franchise business themselves, they had some things that were very pertinent to me to learn from the franchising side. But no, I jumped into the IFA, and I started here in June of '03. And I was at my first IFA conference in January the following year, and then I just kept learning. And I was doing the entire circuit for a while. You name it, IFE, regional IFA stuff. I mean, I just kind of immersed myself into the franchise world for a while, just to because I felt I had to. I didn't know what I didn't know, and that's always a scary thing. So it's something that I really wanted to be a part of and to understand, and that's what I did.
So you said there weren't a lot of people then in the space that had any kinds of programs. So what were franchisors basically doing? And I'm thinking back to my early days, in Blimpie, I didn't have a formal program, but resales were definitely a big part of my life. Actually, to the point I made in the introduction, even I back then viewed resale sometimes as the bane of my existence. I'd have a prospective franchisee looking at a territory. He'd make some phone calls doing validation, and somebody that he talked with, 6 miles up the road would say, well, why don't you talk to me about my store? Yep. And that was not an uncommon occurrence back in those days. So I suppose there is some merit in some of those paradigms that executives may have about resales getting in the way instead of being a carefully planned or thought out part of the structure. And we'll unpack that as we go along. But winding the clock back to those early 2002, I guess 2003 or 4, what did you see on the landscape then globally? I gave you a single example of my experience, but what was the landscape looking like?
No, I think your perception was reality for the most part. I mean, obviously there was some franchisors that were much more advanced and had put together some really strong programs, but a lot of the franchisors that we spoke to in the the early days didn't have a formal program. And a lot of them didn't embrace it, as you said. I think the common thing seemed to be that the development guys became the de facto resale guys. In some cases, I remember specifically a few development guys complaining to me that, man, every time I do a resale with a lead, I make less money. There's less commissions there for me. Mm-hmm. So there was a disincentive from a standpoint of how these guys fed their families. And I think there was just a general malaise, if you will, of saying, resales it's a part of the franchisor lifestyle or life cycle, but it really was something that wasn't embraced and wasn't seen as an opportunity. It was more of a chore. Obviously, over the last 16 years, things have evolved, and I know we'll talk about that. But initially, there was a lot of we don't have a formal resale program, and we really don't talk resales because it just wasn't something that they wanted to entertain and embrace. They were handling them as they came, but that was it. It was really more, like I said, kind of a de facto program.
So, how did you attack that and bring to market the idea of providing carefully thought out and planned services and roll that out for us and help us understand how that would look if somebody in this audience is struggling with some of those things still that we just articulated? How do you set that path straight? What do you do to help offset those shared expenses or costs or losses to your team?
Yeah, so we over the time, just like everybody else, I mean, we've evolved this program over time, and we feel that we brought to we've added components to the program that we think are valuable not only just for the franchisors but also for their franchisees. So the program doesn't look the same today as it did back in 2003, 2004. But some of the components or some of the things that we try to bring to the table is as follows. One is we want to streamline the entire process, not just for the franchisor, but also for the buyer and seller. And I think we can do that by learning on the front end what the franchisor's protocols are for resales. And I stress this to every franchisor I talk to. I'm not looking to recreate or to create a resales program for you. What I'm trying to do is augment what you have. And so if you have a documented resales program, we're going to take that program and we're going to incorporate it into how we do our normal business at Sunbelt. So when we get an opportunity to list one of your sellers and we start finding buyers for them, we're going to be able to set the expectations for buyer, seller alike on what the protocols are going to be. What's discovery day look like? When does training happen before or after? What's the transfer fee? We're going to learn all of these things up front in advance for each one of the franchisors we work with. So it's going to make a streamlined resale for buyer, seller, and franchisor. So the time element there is I think we really can save some time. If you're on the flip side of that, if your franchisee goes out and just hires Mr. and Mrs. Main Street business broker in their local town, and they start talking to buyers, they don't know your protocols. They don't know what you're looking for in a new buyer. They don't know what the minimums are, the net worth capability or net worth requirements are, et cetera. And you and or your seller are going to be training those people from day one, and you're going to be training them multiple times. So we try to streamline it by saying, you train us once at Sunbelt, we'll train our offices, and it'll go smoother for all parties. The other thing that I'll mention to you is we really have focused, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, on the educational component of our program. Most, and this is not my number, but it's you look at the statistics, and they'll say 80% of the small privately held businesses in this country, those owners do not have a succession plan. And for many people, they just haven't thought about it. I mean, they're so busy getting up, going to work, running their daily grind. They haven't thought about what the end looks like because they know the end isn't going to be coming for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years down the road. But when you're a franchisor and your success is contingent upon, having owners who are going to transition the business, and you're going to want the new owners to come in and hit the ground running, it's in your best interest to be having, conversations, educational programs with your franchisees today to say, hey, here's what the end should look like for you, and here's how you go about and making your business more sellable and be able to sell for a higher price. So, a lot of the franchisors that are on our program today are really, coming to the forefront and saying, hey, listen, we want to get you involved from an educational standpoint. I'm going to their national conventions. We're doing webinars. We're doing newsletter articles, and we're talking about the end. And it's like you said, Stan, 16 years ago, that was unheard of. They wanted to bury it in the sand because it had the negative connotation to it. Now, today, most franchisors have realized every franchisee has a finite life cycle. Some are longer than others, but when that person decides to leave, it's in our best interest to help them have a successful exit, and more importantly, help us find the right buyer coming in, because our surveys have shown that when the right buyer comes in, it's a financial boon for the franchisor. So the educational piece has been a big component. The saving time has been a big component. And then last thing I'll mention is, Sunbelt, as we have grown and become, the largest business broker in the country and in the world, we have buyers. We have a deep buyer pool. And so we're able to bring to the forefront not only buyers typically for that particular resale that's going to be, again, the buyer is going to be well-heeled. They're going to meet your minimum requirements that the franchisor has told us about. They're also going to understand what the resales protocol is, so there's not going to be a lot of shock and hey, what's happening now? But we also are able to find buyers that say, you know what, I love that resale, but maybe it's on the wrong part of town, but I really like that franchise, and we can do some franchise referrals as well. So we're kind of the dual agent there, and we can bring qualified buyers for new opportunities as well as for the resales things. And we do this, on the front end for the franchisor at no cost. It doesn't cost them anything to be in part of our program. It's a free program to them. So those have been the most successful things that we've kind of gravitated toward as far as why our program works for franchisors over the last 16 years.
You covered a lot of geography there, and and some of what you touched on just prompted thoughts in my mind about the early stages. A franchisor that is, I guess, a smart one would bring people in for a discovery day and have conversations even then about the exit strategy and the exit plan. When people ask, why is this agreement a 10-year agreement or a 20-year agreement? It's not forever. So if Correct. It's not forever, then let's talk about what your options can look like at a later date. You may want to renew. You may want to go for another 10. Or you may want to have a member of your family or your child is going to be in business with you. It's going to be a legacy play. But for those who are in the moment, and they're looking at a 10-year agreement, to me, I would view it similar to someone who's shopping for a house. You don't want to go shop for a house, and expect to move into it a week later. You need to put a foundation of time in place. It's a long transaction. And if you're buying an agreement from a franchisor for 10 or 15 or 20 years, you don't want to start looking for a buyer when it's time to find the buyer or to have the buyer. You want to have that plan in mind. And it's ironic that in the IFA Smart Brief today, I caught a link to an article that's talking exactly about what you and I are discussing today from the business brokerage perspective, but it was written by a gentleman from a company called the Resales Group, RAWLSGROUP.com. Resales Group was, these are succession planners. These are people whose business it is to help franchisors or franchisees have these thoughts from succession planning, from financial planning perspective, more so from the actual transactional base. But the timing was unique, having you on today and having this article appearing in the IFA Smart Brief at the same time. And I'm going to link this up on the Franchise Today Facebook page after the interview so that the audience can find this link to further validate the things that we're talking about here today, Terry.
Well, and I don't think it's a coincidence that you're having me on today and the Resales Group article appears because at the end of the day, all of this is I think predicated on the fact that there's a push coming. Right. There's a baby boomer push, and maybe I'm jumping ahead. I know you wanted to talk about this eventually, but there's a baby boomer push. The 78 million baby boomers in this country own a lot. We're talking over 1 million, maybe 2 million small privately held businesses in this country, and the wave has already started. They're exiting, and so it's just going to become more and more rampant. I think over the next 3, 5, 10 years, we're going to see unprecedented number of businesses for sale in the open marketplace. And so I think that there's been a lot more activity, a lot more chatter about this recently, and I think it's just going to continue. And as you said, just today you got me talking, and you got the Resales Group writing. So it's definitely on a lot of people's minds.
Let's unpack that a little bit further right after we take a break, and then we'll come back and talk more about that and some of the statistics that I've been seeing that are trending in the exact direction that you're describing. We'll be right back after this important word from our sponsors.
Franchise Today will be right back, but first, a word from our sponsors.
Franchise Today is produced and presented each week by FRM Solutions, providing best-in-class CRM and document management software designed specifically for franchising. FRM enables real-time business intelligence, communication, and collaboration between all members of the franchisor's team and their prospective and existing franchisees. This empowers your team to simply and seamlessly track, access, and manage all communications to and from prospects and existing franchisees, including texts. Legal and compliance is simplified too. With FRM's document management, and even site visits can be digitally facilitated and scored using FRM. Make today the day you give FRM a look and assure that all of your candidate and franchisee correspondence, including texts, are being permanently tracked and archived in both candidate and franchisee records. FRM even provides state-of-the-art digital experiences for your prospective franchisees, replacing old-style virtual brochures. No long-term contracts are required. Multiple upgrades are given each year at no additional cost. No excuses, just solutions on the web at frmsolutions.com. So back to the point we were kind of touching on at the break. I've seen statistics over the past many years. In fact, there were 2 articles written that you were part of. I think both of these articles that I found, one from 2015 in Franchise Times and an update to that in 2018. In both cases, in 2015, the conversation was already ensuing about how the economy coming out of the recession was becoming very fertile for franchise resales. And then I saw statistics in the article, the update last year, that talked about Fran data measuring that across all active brands in franchising, resales rose from 3.5% in 2013 to 4.1% in 2016. And then I've read from companies like the Dwyer Group or now Neighborly, seeing 2.5 to 3% in resales each year for a variety of reasons. And that this company, as they've done in so many other aspects of their business, has been a pioneer in establishing an internal resale department to help franchisees sell their businesses. But when you look at the economy today and you look at the world we're living in today, virtually zero unemployment, how does all of that impact your end of the business? And I know that a lot of franchisors are feeling the pinch because the job market is so strong. Instead of asking somebody to write a check to buy something, they're having checks written to them as signing bonuses to take employment instead of business ownership. What's that look like in your world, Terry?
We're seeing that as well. I look at the Minnesota unemployment. I think it's right at 3% right now, which is never been this low in my lifetime. And I've been here for many decades. So it's an interesting time, from that perspective. And we do have a lot of people who I think would be great business buyers who have decided to remain in corporate America or go back to corporate America because the job market dictates that there are opportunities for them to do so. That being said, we're still coming off 2018 was still a record year for the number of transactions that got done. And so when you try to balance those two statements, well, people are going back to work in corporate America, and yet there was a record number of transactions getting done, that tells you that there is still very much an appetite for small business in this country, for entrepreneurship in this country, and of course, franchising has always been the driving force behind most of that, or if not a majority of that. So we're still able to see a lot of deals get done. Part of it's being fueled by the fact that there's a lot of businesses for sale. Again, as the baby boomers start exiting, and then just the normal churn of people who are selling their business for the right reasons. They bought it 5 years ago with the intent of growing it and selling it. Maybe they're selling it for human reasons like sickness, divorce, the partnership dissolution, those type of things. So there's a good mix right now, a good balance still, even with unemployment being as low it is. There's still a very good balance between the number of businesses that is for sale and the number of willing and enabled buyers. And the buyers, by the way, Stan, if you look at what the economy means from the buy side of things, what fuels a buyer's ability or motivation to buy a business? Well, number one is they do look at the general economy. We all know where that's been, the last 3 or 4 years. It's been, on an unbelievable track. We've seen all-time highs in the Dow. So there's a lot of confidence. Number two is their ability to lend. Well, you look at, 2017 was the single biggest SBA lending year ever. 2018 fell just short of it, but it was still, was the second biggest record year. Buyers have their portfolios, their 401ks. They're at very high levels right now. Their house values have all come back from the recession, so they're at very high levels. So their ability to get a loan and money is still relatively cheap. I know the interest rates have ratcheted up, the last couple of years, but it's still relatively cheap. So you got a lot of positive factors out there. There's lots of good businesses on the market. Banks are willing and willing and able to lend. Buyers have confidence, it still has led to a very, very good market, and that's manifested itself in record years in 2016, 2017, and 2018 in small business resales.
So I'm a franchisor listening to this today, and I'm still a little bit nervous about my budget for the year is X based on this many territories that I'm going to license, and here come resales to be thought about as well. Put my mind at ease. Tell the franchisors in this audience what it is that they should be thinking and how to adjust that shift in their thinking to take full advantage of a program like yours.
Well, I think I think the big thing that that should be considered when you're looking at juggling between new and resales is what other resources can we bring to the table to help kind of diversify that risk. And as I mentioned to you guys or to the call, just a few minutes back was what we have. Our biggest resource as a business brokerage is our buyer pool. So if you have a resale in an area and you've only got one lead for that area that came in on the new side of things, do you really want to give up that one lead to help sell that resale? It's something that that most franchisors are going to have to struggle with, especially with the lead flow being down. And I know on the development side of things, franchisors. I talked to many of them, and the lead flow has been down the last year or so. We bring an opportunity, I think, to help diversify that, to help expand the lead pool for both new and resales. And the nice thing about us is we're an option. There's nothing mandatory about our program. If you get on the program, you can use us when you feel you need to. The franchisees don't have to necessarily use us, but hopefully they'll see the benefit of doing so. But I think being able to just to bring more resources to the table and hopefully more buyers to the table is going to result in the franchisor seeing more deals get done, both on the resale side of things as well as on the new side of things.
So if I put my franchisor hat back on again, and I haven't worn that hat in 8 or 10 years now, it's been that long. But if I put my hat back on again, I think that a couple of things that would pique my interest would be that buyer pool. So what that tells me is if I've got a resale, I need it off the market as quickly as I can get it done. I don't need that hanging out there. First of all, I have a franchisee that doesn't want to be here anymore or that I don't want here anymore. The sooner I can fix that, the better. And I have to believe too that from a validation perspective, it's got to be better too, to have happy campers out there, not people saying, I want to sell my store. Why don't you buy mine? So those are two things that from a franchisor point of view, I think would make a lot of sense to me. Go back to the economics again. I think you said something about no cost or low cost, or talk about what the costs to a franchisor would be to have your program.
On the resale side of things, there is absolutely no cost, and there's never a cost to the franchisor. We form these relationships and these partnerships strictly based on the fact that it's going to be a referral and recommendation basis. When the franchisor introduces us to one of their selling franchisees, our local Sunbelt office will go out, will explain our value proposition to that seller. If that seller sees the value proposition and likes it, they're going to sign a local listing agreement. When the business sells, the selling franchisee will pay the Sunbelt broker fee. There's never a cost to the franchisor on the resales program. So we're positioned as a resource. We're here to augment what the franchisor has already done. And look, I've got franchisors in our program who have their own resales programs, but they've added us as another arrow in the quiver, just in case they can't find that buyer in that one town for that one franchisee, or if they just want to have the ability to say we want more buyers coming in the door. Because Stan, you hit the nail on the head. When going back to your comment about franchisors looking at the guy or gal who's selling their business and saying, you know what, it's in my best interest to get them out as quickly as possible. When you have an owner that demonstrates an interest in selling, pretty much their motivation to follow the strategic initiatives of the brand to maximize their profits and therefore the franchisor royalties, that's usually gonna take a back seat shortly, or it's already taken a back seat. So it's imperative from a franchisor perspective that when somebody raises their hand, I think it needs to be moved along quickly. And we've done studies with some of our franchisor partners, and we've found that when a new motivated owner takes over a unit and follows the brand's strategic initiatives and is well capitalized and really goes after the business, the results are staggering. It's the increases that we're seeing on first year owners versus the last year of the old franchisee in the business is double digit increases in sales, and therefore it's a nice increase in revenues for the franchisor.
What do you see in terms of who participates from the franchisor side in the transactions? So are franchisors using the same teams of development people and having to compensate them on some kind of a lesser commission basis, or are executives managing this outside of the hands of the typical fran dev team? How do you see that working?
Yeah, I think it runs all over the board. I think you hit the nail on the head on a couple more of the common scenarios. There are a couple programs or a couple franchisors out that are really progressive. You mentioned Neighborly for one. They do a great job with their an internal program and have a lot of people dedicated to it. In many cases, on the franchisor is kind of just moved the resales into the realm of the franchise development. I do think they've in most cases got rid of the inequity of the compensation thing, because they understand the benefit of the resale and the opportunity the resale presents. So I think they're paying more equitable versus the new. But now it just becomes a question of the biggest inventory that people have, and that's time, right? I mean, how much time and day do you have to focus on new, and how much time do you have to focus on the resales? And the resales are important, obviously, because again, there's an opportunity to get a new person in there, re-energize, grow the brand, grow the royalties. But franchisor businesses are also in business to grow, from a unit standpoint, and so you don't want to take your foot off the gas from a new sales perspective. So it just becomes a question of resources, and that's why, again, we've created the program so we will augment what you're doing on both new sales and resale side. We're just another arrow in the quiver, as I said earlier, and you can use us as you see fit and as your franchisees need us to do so.
How do you see financing playing into these deals? Do these get done the same way? And you mentioned earlier the 401k and the SBA. Are financing vehicles for existing locations on the same set of circumstances or criteria established for the purchase of a new unit? Or is it more favorable because there is a P&L and that this is an existing business that we can look at history on? How does that look?
It can be more favorable, but it also can be worked as a detriment with the P&L, because if the P&L is not, if it's not great, if there's issues with the P&L, or let's say the unit doesn't have good financials, in this day and age, it's kind of weird to say that, because most franchisors are so automated with their CRM systems and stuff like that. But there are franchises out there that simply don't have their franchisees or the franchisees aren't following their control systems, and so from a P&L standpoint, banks, the resale is going to be evaluated based on the strength of the unit. It's not going to be overall looked at by the strength of the franchisor. The strength of the franchisor comes into play as far as, if it's a really good franchisor with a really strong history, then as long as the unit P&Ls are decent, it's going to get ratified by any bank. But if the unit P&Ls aren't great, it's difficult to find financing. So then you're looking at the buyer using the 401k programs, and 401ks work for both new sales and resales, or you're looking at seller financing. And I'll tell you that seller financing is it can be a very big part of the deal many times, and we've seen sellers make a lot more money when they sell or finance their business, because they're collecting that interest and they're saving money on taxes and those type of things when they're willing to carry some paper back. But one of the things that we pride ourselves on is the ability to create a deal, right? If we got a willing buyer and a willing seller, let's figure out the best way that's going to make this thing work and get a deal done. And I think that's one of the things that again we bring to the table, because this is what we do on a daily basis. So, but the SBA, as I mentioned, has been really strong the last couple of years. We've seen some record years of lending. And I think as long as the economy keeps chugging along, that'll continue. If we go back, though, Stan, 10 years, go back to 2009, when after the recession hit in 2008, it was very difficult to get a loan for a resale, even for businesses that had really good financials. Banks were just nervous. The SBA wasn't doing a lot of lending. So that is a very cyclical thing. I think we've seen that before, and we'll cross our fingers and just hope the economy just keeps moving forward, and we don't have to worry about a correction or a recession that's going to cause a movement downward in the amount of loans being done. But if that happens again, we'll do what we did last time, and that is we focus on buyer financing and seller financing.
What about assignment fees? Do they typically get paid by the seller or the buyer, or does that get negotiated into the deal? How do you work with those?
Yeah, great question. So, most every franchisor has a transfer fee or assignment fee in their contract, in their franchise agreement, and of course, that's with the agreements with the seller. So ultimately, it is the seller's responsibility. But we try to incorporate that into our pricing and the market price that we're going out to business. We're going to usually try to get the buyer to pay all or a portion of that. It's negotiable. We found over the years, Stan, that the franchisor doesn't really care much who pays for it, as long as it gets paid, as long as they get the transfer fee and those funds get covered. So it's definitely a point of negotiation, and that we try to get the buyer to participate.
And with you involved in the transaction and having a program with the franchisor and better understanding the brand's value and the brand's proposition, I have to think that you become almost a hybrid between what a franchise consultant or broker does, bringing candidates to their brands that they represent. A little bit of that comes to mind here too, because you are vetting these prospects. You're bringing buyers that are a better fit perhaps for this brand than another. What happens when you get somebody who's doing a hybrid deal? Maybe the franchisor is going to package something up where the person who's going to buy the resale is also going to buy a couple of new stores or one new store too. How does that all blend together? How does that work?
Yeah, and this is a great question, and I'll just give you an example that just kind of recently happened. So we had one of our franchisors had given us a seller on the East Coast that wanted to sell their business, but it wasn't a high performing business, and it was going to be very difficult to get a loan for the business, and really it was going to be very difficult to attract a buyer, just to that resale. Because of the financials and the shape of that individual unit, and I had a conversation with the franchisor after I talked to the local broker, and they had the same concerns I did. So I called the franchisor back and said, "Hey, listen, I think we need to get creative here." And again, I think this plays into the power of when a franchisor is working with us. We package that resale along with 2 new corporate territories that were available. And now all of a sudden we have something to go to market to say, hey, you can get a larger area. You can hopefully get better opportunities with bank financing, because we got the corporate territories, the new territories involved. And it just made it a lot easier to attract a buyer to that particular franchise because of that. So when we're working with a franchisor, on these initiatives, I just think the creativity gets a lot higher. And we're able to work out solutions that normally wouldn't be there if a franchisor was trying to do it on their own, or just working with a single business broker in a small town. So having a national partner like us, I think it leads to more creativity and to getting more deals done.
Everything I read focuses heavily on what a store owner or a business owner or a franchisee needs to do to prepare for this kind of a scenario. Not too much out there that I read, Terry, about the conversation that we're having today. So in the little bit of time we have left before we wrap, why don't you sum up, if you would, the steps and the order that they should come in for a franchisor to prepare themselves for a conversation with you or someone in your shoes. I don't think there are any others that do quite what you do the way you do it. But lay it out for the franchisors listening and tell them what to do and when to do it and how in preparation for a deeper conversation with you.
Well, Stan, and I really appreciate that opportunity. Thank you very much for teeing that up. Yeah, I mean, it starts with a conversation. Any franchisor listening that just wants to have a conversation and tell us a little bit about what they're doing on the resale side of things or the new sales side of things, what they're looking for. Again, we try to adapt our programs to your objectives, your goals, your needs. With over 150 different franchises now that we're working with between the two programs, I can tell you we customize it to make it work for the franchisor. If it doesn't work for you or it doesn't work for me, it doesn't work. So we customize it so it's a good fit for both. So it starts with just a conversation. Giving me a call, dropping me an email. Talking a little bit about what your objectives are, what your pain points are, and then see if Sunbelt could be a good fit for that. And if it's something that after that point in time that the franchisor says, yeah, this is something I want to pursue, then we'll take the next step. And there's not a lot of paperwork to do this. We made joining our program very, very simple, very, very easy. Because again, there's no money being changed hands between us and the franchisor. So it's a very low risk proposition to join our program and to have us as a resource. And then from that point in time, I mean, we'll suggest things that, on how we can get involved and how we can help. But it really comes up to the franchisor's taste. I mean, I mentioned that I have, a lot of franchisors that have me come to national conventions or do webinars, and do newsletter articles about, articles regarding, succession planning, exit strategies, maximizing the value at exit, stuff like that. I will also tell you that I have some franchisors that that don't take advantage of that to that extent, and I'm okay with that. We'll walk or crawl at whatever speed the franchisor wants. Obviously, I'll make suggestions along the way. But at the end of the day, the franchisor has control on how this relationship gets rolled out. And I just think that given that fact, it's a very low risk proposition for franchisors to consider.
Well, you said it all starts with a phone call or an email. Terry, why don't you share both those data points with the audience so they know how to find you?
Be glad to. So again, Terry Kelm with Sunbelt Franchise Resales, and you can reach me toll free at 888-484-0332, or you can reach me via email, and that email is first initial last name, so TKELM at sunbeltnetwork.com.
Can't help but wonder if that toll-free number might be the next dinosaur that goes away, displaced by
you never know.
Long-distance calling, right?
You never know, but who would have thought 20 years ago that we wouldn't be renting VHS tapes and we wouldn't be using phone booths, right?
You got me twice, Terry. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for coming and for sharing and for shedding light on what should be a no-brainer for most, but again is usually neglected or kind of put aside. I hope that the transparency that you've brought to the conversation today will help some franchisors benefit from what you've shared with us. Thanks so much for being here,
Stan, and thank you again for everything you do for the franchise community. Your interaction with with IFA and all the different things, and doing this weekly broadcast. It speaks volume about you as a person and about your commitment to the industry. So my hat's off to you, bud.
Well, I'm just paying back for those who paid for it, and thank you for bringing it to the light of day. Appreciate that too, Terry. Thanks again.
We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Next week, I'm going to be joined by another pro athlete who traded in a playbook for an ops manual, but this time it's an ops manual that he actually wrote. I'm talking about retired Major League Baseball player and Burn Boot Camp co-founder and CEO Devin Klein, who next week will define for us success as he sees it, which is by the amount of people that he can help to mentally, physically, and emotionally overcome their odds. Most of Devin's childhood was riddled with violence, drug abuse, and alcoholism by his parents. His father frequently in and out of jail, Devin became a man at a very early age. Today, he brings his hope and determination to his franchisees of more than 200 burn boot camp locations in 37 states, offering strength for the body and passion for the soul. It's all next week on Franchise Today. Until then, I'm Stan Friedman, wishing you the best, the very best of all things franchising. And Franchise Today is out.
Franchise Today is a production of FRM Solutions, providing best-in-class CRM tools to empower relationships with prospective and existing franchisees. No excuses, just solutions. Find them online at frmsolutions.com. Join Stan every Wednesday at noon Eastern for another live episode of Franchise Today. Or, as always, download episodes on demand at blogtalkradio.com or iTunes.
When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. So at American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University. Value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.